The I think what's evidenced in Umi's statement is kind of reflects the human condition. Life is hard and it's complicated and it's challenging. None of us have any idea that we're doing. Thank God we have Seth Godin's books. And we're all trying to figure it out. And we look for shortcuts, right? We look for shortcuts. We look for ways of making sense to the world. And this fear and this anxiety and these concerns and these unknowns cause people to act in um, frightening ways and in unpredictable ways and in ways that we wouldn't be proud of if we emulated this behavior ourselves. I think the only antidote to this at the end of the day is a bold and courageous, aggressive cultivation of empathy. And I think of everything that I've learned over the years, of all the skills that I've garnered and the things that I found to be beneficial to my quality of life and my ability to do some of the things that I've done, is this notion of empathy. Because if you understand why people do the things that you do, the world unlocks to you because you can not only get the things accomplished that you want to accomplish, you can do it in a way that benefits other people as well. So there are, many cliched quotes about how you can get what you want out of life by helping other people get what they want and so forth. And I think these things are true.
Right.
Fundamentally, for me, it comes down to this idea of empathy. Why would somebody say something so hurtful to you? You might be thinking that to yourself. Why does this question make me feel like this? Why does a particular email response make you feel like your work is not valued? Sitting with these reactions that you have to your own emotions and why statements make you feel the way that you feel, I think gives us remarkable insight into human nature. And so when you break things down from that perspective and you really view things from the lens of someone who is aggressively empathetic, and you start speaking as if you want to be understood rather than you wanting to be heard, and you anticipate what the response might be, and you really put a little bit more effort, or in some cases, a lot more effort into the way that you communicate, I think the world can unlock for you. And I've experienced that over years and years. And one of the books that I would recommend for putting you in the mindset of this thinking is Dale Carnegie's seminal How to Win Friends and Influence People. Very curious book title, but I think it was written in the 30s. But it is a tremendous book ahead of its time. And just about the fundamental way that we can communicate with each other, and a lot of the best practices for going about that. And internalizing that mindset, cultivating this sense of empathy and understanding why people act in those ways will allow you in many cases to disarm so many unpleasant situations and avoid other situations altogether, because you will over time understand the types of people that are best to surround yourself with and the types of people who are most grateful for the way that you live your life. And so this can act as something of a compass as you're navigating life and figuring out how to piece these disparate elements together. Empathy, empathy, empathy. I cannot stress enough how critical that's been for my journey and my career.
I've written down aggressively empathetic as a motto to seek after here. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
That's phenomenal, Willie.
That's it.
I want to hear your thoughts on something that I've been tumbling around in my head for a while now. And as I was reading over Abernathy and some of your posts, it just bubbled up like a geyser in my mind. The key to finding your tribe, to use Seth's book title, is establishing the important differentiating factors that bind tribe members together. But it seems to me that that conversations that actually lead to progress happen in the middle part of what I see as the Venn diagram, where common ground can be found. Do you have any thoughts or insights about how the two fundamental needs, what I call the need to be set apart or belong to something special, and set aside, and then the need to be part of a greater whole, something bigger and larger, how those two needs can be bridged to actually get beyond rhetoric to get important work done? I mean, over the last couple of years, I've increasingly been calling myself a radical moderate in a world in which I see radical extremism being celebrated. I mean, our political scene right now is a good example where people are on ends of a spectrum screaming,
Mhm.
but I don't see anyone enough in the middle having conversations that will actually affect change. So I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on that, because we've touched on a little bit about having a tribe or targeting an audience is important, but then to actually make things happen, we've got to bring people together and have conversations that affect that change. Does that make sense at all?
It does. I think I understand the spirit of the question, and I think I might have something for it. It's perhaps not the answer you're looking for, but you can send it right back if it's not. The only thing I can offer is what has worked for me and what I found useful and what I've experimented with. And curiously, the thing I would recommend would be learning history of all things. The world that we see when we look out of our window and we ride down the street, and when we, move about in society, is one that was constructed largely by wealthy, opportunistic, and sometimes very smart industrialists hundreds of years ago. So our society is largely a creation of humans, right? And it might sound like I'm being glib, but what we're talking about is a posture that forces you to not take your surroundings for granted. Why we do certain things, why we work 40 hours a week, why there are, green, red, and yellow lights, why certain things exist the way they are. Not only is the pursuit of this knowledge in and of itself worthwhile and in many cases immensely useful, it gives you some important background in understanding how change propagates through society over the years and over time. And when you start to understand why these things come together, why things the way they are, why the political system looks the way it does, why our neighborhoods are segregated along class and ethnic lines, how subdivisions popped up and where, the effect of gentrification, what that really means to the communities affected by it, on down the line. When you really learn the history of these things, it will completely change your perspective of them. And so I think it would be a mistake to try to start with finding your tribe if you don't know the history of the thing that you care about in the first place. And I'll relate that to my story.
Right.
Uh, I benefited from a great education growing up, but I was not really taught Black history in schools. A lot of these lessons have, for various reasons, been removed from the history textbooks. There are basically about 12 textbooks being used in our school system in America to teach American history, and I will just say that they are not all great, and they're not all representative of um, the history of these United States. And so when you look a little bit deeper at history and you consult some different texts that synthesize different information from folks with different backgrounds, you start to form a picture of the world that, in my case, completely changed how I thought about this notion of America and this notion of Western society and my place in it. And addressing a lot of the things that I didn't know, filling in the blanks historically, understanding why things are the way that they are, had just absolutely transformed a lot of things for me in terms of the freedom I felt to pursue different avenues professionally. It allowed me to give myself permission to pursue things that had nothing to do with my degree program. I mean, these things are deeply personal, right? So I was telling myself a story that I'm a technologist because that's what my degree was in. So I have to do technology work. The trouble is, I self-identify as an artist. A lot of my joy during my undergraduate experience at Florida State University came from poetry and spoken word, which I practiced and I wrote, and I enjoyed very much. I helped to start an urban arts organization. You could call it a poetry troupe called Soul Food, speaking our urban language, fulfilling our own destiny, where we were, sharing poems, and we would have musical artists, we would have poets, and we would organize events throughout campus and so forth. And I view the world as an artist, but I'm also an engineer. I'm also a technologist. So this fusion, I used to feel some strain around this. I used to feel some tension. But understanding history, really getting to the bottom of interests and these passions of mine and the history of the industries that characterize them has paradoxically opened up the world to me in terms of the freedom I feel because I find more weird people. I find more weird people on the edges who have made change, who have affected change, who have caused some wonderful things to happen in the world. And I think when you start looking at the weirdos and the outliers and the creatives, and probably a lot of the folks that are listening to this, people like us,
Thank you.
You will find great relief and great solace. That's what I would say. It's paradoxical, it's winding, and that was a long-winded response, but that's how I would respond to that question.
How do you see bringing those outliers that are marginalized together to affect the conversation in ways that actually can make some more meaningful impact?
I think one general rule that you can try is start by one person. Start with one person. So, Tim Ferriss has famously talked about how he was having a rough time starting his first drafts of the 4 Hour Work Week. And he was trying to speak in this really heady intellectual voice, and that sounded terrible, so he threw it out. And then he was talking in a really almost like a slang slapstick kind of way, and he threw that out. But then he fixed in his mind one or two friends that he was going to write to in the form of a letter. And that proved to be the tone that worked. And, the book has sold an enormous number of copies. And so if you try to deal with things in the abstract, this idea of marginalized communities, you're going to have a hard time. But if you think about the lady that you pass by on the bodega, I live in New York, so there are bodegas on every corner. If you think about the lady who's asking for money, every week at the bodega, and what her life might look like and why she got there and the economic factors and the historical factors and so forth. And you really try to understand one person's worldview. What's the thing that they need? Why might they need it? Really going back to this notion of radical empathy.
To say the least, right.
What can you ascertain about this person's story? What elements of his or her humanity can you glean? And how does that touch you? How does that affect you? Are you qualified to speak on any of these things? Can you do anything about these ideas? Does this lead you to any conclusion? So I don't have a punchline so much as a formula and a posture. And my posture is that of curiosity and in that of empathy, in that of personal interrogation. And so combining these things leads me on a journey where I think about the stories of folks who are like mine or not, and the importance of storytelling in that context. So at the end of the day, I care very much about humanity and stories that embody humanity, stories that embody and tell a story through history and the historical record and things like that. So I'm essentially cherry picking elements that I found to be effective in my journey through life in the service of the broader mission, which is storytelling.
Well, as you were telling that story, it reminded me about an encouraging post that you had several months ago called Inspiration is Everywhere, in which you talked about not just noticing things and moving on to the next distraction, but as you just mentioned, the woman that you see week to week at the bodega, actually noticing, having empathy, seeing her as human. How does that storytelling, that narrative, that thought develop your own voice or point of view long enough to put it in the world to make a difference instead of chasing the next distraction? I ask that because so many creative leaders are ADD. I mean, they care deeply, but the next thing is popping up. How do you offer, some insights of ways to just channel that empathy, that narrative in a way that can make a difference?
I would start with what makes you cry. One of the best ways to get tears to come out of Willie Jackson's face is with viral videos on Facebook that show, some adorable child being adorable, or some, father coming home from Afghanistan and surprising his child, during a school function. The videos that just won't leave me alone. What touches you? What makes you feel something? What makes you react? What makes you angry? And there are, and these are deeply personal things,
right?
And again, I don't have a roadmap. I just know what works for me. And so, as you examine your own barometer,